Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this very special episode of the Utah Stories program. On the program today, we have a visit with Jack Hedge, who is the Executive Director of the Inland Port Authority. We are going to be asking him all the really tough questions that a lot of people have concerning the inland port and how it's moving forward. They have a whole new plan they've rolled out. Just recently, we're going to be going over some of the plans, and especially talking about the environmental impact to our wetlands area, our bird refuge area, and you won't want to miss that. It's going to be great. But before we get to that, I want to tell you about Canyon Meadows grass-fed beef. If you have not tried pasture-raised beef yet, you need to give Canyon Meadows a chance. And we have a special offer code in place for all Utah Stories podcast listeners. It's a really great deal to get a special discount on your first time ever trying grass-fed beef. What the difference is between pasture-raised beef and traditional beef is the entire life of a cow is spent on pasture. And if you didn't know, the way beef is produced in this country, they end up feeding cows about the last third of their life in what's called a feedlot, where they feed them grain, mostly corn, and then they put them in what they call CAFOs, which are high occupancy feed areas where they just basically fatten them up. They have to give them antibiotics and steroids to keep them healthy. It's not the best conditions. Pasture-raised beef is healthier for you. It's healthier for the environment. Go check them out right now at cmrbeef.com and use Utah Stories, the offer code. They'll give you a special discount. Most of their ordering's done online through their telephone line. If you mention Utah Stories, you'll get, like I said, a special discount. It's good for the earth, it's good for you, and it has delicious flavor. Visit cmrbeef.com right now. All right, so without further ado, Jack Hedge, thanks for joining us on the program.
Thank you for having me. Really appreciate this opportunity and appreciate the chance to talk to your listeners.
Yeah, so first of all, the Inland Port Authority, the makeup of the group. Who is the group who is on the board? Are you from Utah, or what's your background?
So I was hired about a year ago. I've been here now just over a year. I was hired from the Port of Los Angeles, the largest container port in North America, and I was hired really to come to Utah and take over as executive director of the Port Authority. Really because of my background in California and also at the Port of Tacoma, where we were heavily focused on air emissions issues at the Port of LA and water quality issues at the Port of Tacoma. So I really do think that was the differentiator and why they hired me to come here. The board is appointed by legislation, and it's made up primarily of representatives of the various jurisdictions that the Port Authority boundary touches. Mm-hmm. So we have people on the board from Salt Lake City, people on the board from Salt Lake County, from West Valley City, and from Magna Township, primarily.
And these are just appointed by the state legislature?
Yeah, the various positions were delineated in the appointing legislation, and they represent those jurisdictional areas that we touch with our boundaries.
Okay. So let's just dive into the most critical questions. Here in Utah, we have a booming economy already. We have a huge influx of people. We have a huge housing shortage. It's been called a housing crisis by a lot of people in the media here. There's just a strong sentiment that we don't need more jobs. We especially don't need jobs that are going to detract from our quality of life here. We want to have cleaner air. We want to have fewer cars on the road. We want to have more protection of our environmental assets. And one of the greatest environmental assets we have is the Great Salt Lake and the bird migratory area we have here. Why should anyone in Salt Lake City buy into this idea that we need to have thousands of additional trucks and planes coming in and out of this area?
Well, we have thousands of additional trucks and trains coming in out of this area every day because of the zoning and the development that's taken place in this area to begin with. There's already well in excess, almost 100 million square feet of warehouse distribution space that's been built up in this area to begin with. You already have the confluence of the freeway system interchange that's in this area to begin with. You have the largest Western intermodal rail hub um, already here to begin with, and that's just grown up as an ad hoc sort of organic growth that's happened because of the population growth that we have here. We have the fastest population growth just about of anywhere in the nation here in Utah. So this has grown up. This has grown up as a result of that population growth.
Yeah, and so we already have this growth, though. And a lot of people in Utah, especially people who've been here for generations, like my family, we're not excited about more growth. We're not excited about more industry, more logistics. I can see that we are already a hub for the Western United States, and that infrastructure is already there. We have, I-80 and I-15. We have an international airport that exists already. But how can you have the additional infrastructure being built now on top of our bird migratory area and not have the terrible environmental impacts like Utah Physicians for a Healthy Environment have spoken about, of basically just decimating the mosquito population, which the birds come there to feed on?
Well, the reason for it is not that logistics induces growth. Logistics is there to support. It's the backbone of a strong economy. Without a strong economy, we can't deal with some of the issues that we already have and are going to continue to have in the future. So logistics doesn't induce that growth. Logistics is there to support that growth, and smart logistics and sustainable logistics is the way of the future. So without the Port Authority, what you continue to get is more of the same. What we've been able to do by creating the Port Authority and bringing to bear the Port Authority onto that area and onto, frankly, the state as a network of logistics facilities, is really start to bring forth that the insertion of that public benefit, that public good, that public awareness of what these impacts are and how do we address them in the future. How do we bring these new technologies, these disruptive technologies, to bear that really can change that equation.
Well, I'm not arguing that logistics aren't a good thing. I definitely agree. Good logistics is a good thing, and nobody would argue that. What I'm arguing against is, we have the Salt Lake Valley. We have this northwest quadrant. We have that's basically the only area left where you could possibly build something in Salt Lake County. That development is
development's already ongoing and already underway. And so what we're here to do is try to insert that next generation of buildings so that those impacts, primarily on the Great Salt Lake, and primarily on that critical habitat area that is north and west of the development area, is protected, and that the development that goes on in this area is done in such a way that it actually adds to the quality. So rather than diverting water away from the Salt Lake, that we're building things in a way that the water, the storm water that runs off from that area, gets put back into the lake in a way that is beneficial to the birds. It gets treated and gets taken care of prior to, and that's the basis of our agreement with Audubon Society. The cooperation agreement that we signed with National Audubon is really around protecting that habitat area and creating the types of stormwater treatment areas, stormwater management control facilities, so that the water that comes off the development gets treated and dealt with in a way that is not detrimental to the lake. It is not detrimental to that habitat.
So
area.
if I understand you right,
and that's the reason for preserving that natural area between the development. There's almost 3,000 acres of land that's been preserved between the development boundary and that habitat area just to get this back on the track I'm talking about. As a citizen of the track we're talking about.
Well, this is what I'm talking about. As a citizen of Salt Lake County, there are 16,000 acres in the northwest quadrant. And a lot of the people who live here would prefer to see that remain a swamp and a bird habitat refuge.
But obviously, that's a fallacy. That 16,000 acres is not part of the habitat area. It's not part of the wetlands area.
I,
That's the misinformation that's out there. Of the 16,000 acres in that jurisdictional area, there's only about 7,000 acres of it that's developable. The rest has already been developed. The rest already exists.
but if you have a plane coming down with cargo on it and there's a bird trying to take off, how do those two things coexist?
The bird habitat area is separated from the developable area. We've demarcated that area for development and put very strong limits on that area, and then created a 3,000 acre buffer between the habitat area and the development area. So the development's already happening. It's already going on out there. The question really is, how do we protect and preserve those areas going forward?
So you're saying that
the
bus has already left the station. There's no changing the designation of that land to preserve it for ecology and habitat for birds. It's going to be developed, and you will develop it in the best possible way. Is that kind of your?
Yeah, so Salt Lake City set those boundaries years ago with this development plan, with its land use plan, its zoning plan, its development plan. What we've done is we've said, okay, we will accept those boundaries. We will strengthen those boundaries through recent legislation. This last round of legislation that we went through set that as a very hard limit of development, no more. And it also demarcated and set into perpetuity that natural area as boundary. So now we're working with Audubon and the landowners to say, well, how do we preserve that? What's the best way to make sure that that buffer area gets preserved into perpetuity? And how do we protect that for going forward? And then within the development area, within the development zone, within those limits of development, how do we make that development so that it incorporates the latest low impact development techniques, so that how do we implement dark sky lighting techniques so that it doesn't impact the birds or the surrounding communities that are in those areas? How do we treat the water, the storm water that's coming off those roofs and those pavements, by implementing the newest permeable pavement and other stormwater treatment mechanisms and things like that? Those are the kinds of things we're doing. But we did not change or move beyond any of the limits that had previously been set by Salt Lake City or anyone else.
Well, that's kind of what's brought this to the forefront, though. It's that we are seeing this booming economy. I think 10 years ago when this master plan was created, we needed jobs here. Nobody would argue that. Utah wanted to attract jobs, development, manufacturing, logistics, whatever we could. But today's economy, 10 years later after that master plan was created, we have a totally different scenario now. We have a housing shortage. We don't have enough houses for the people who have been living here for generations. Yeah. They can't buy houses here for a reasonable price. Now we have a major job surplus, that we can't fill the jobs that already exist in Utah. Don't you think it's worth taking another examination of this master plan before we move forward with it, before we create this massive infrastructure, logistical, no matter how green and wonderful it is, it's going to add a ton of jobs and people and more trucks and planes into the area.
Well, but I think that's part of that misinformation. Logistics facilities and ports in and of themselves are not economic drivers. They are economic support. They are required to have a strong economy. Part of the reason we have such a strong economy in Utah today is because of that infrastructure and those logistics facilities that exist and have grown to keep pace with the economic growth. You've either, in an economic situation, you've either got economic growth or you've got economic decline. There's no such thing as stasis in an economy. So you're in a hell of a lot better position to try to deal with issues and problems around housing, around equality, around equity and social justice issues and environmental issues and things like that when you have a growing economy than when you have a declining economy. And it's one or the other.
You know, we interviewed Greg Hughes on this program, and he was, one of the men who spearheaded the inland port, and he saw that it could promise, a lot of jobs, a lot of additional growth in Utah. And I believe he and Huntsman ran on the idea that Utah wanted more of that. But we kind of, at this point, I feel like a lot of people agree we need to put the brakes on and put the environment and our quality of life on a higher pedestal than jobs in the economy. Because you go in the mountains in the middle of winter when it's an inversion, you look down and all you see is a orange grayish soup. And we want that to be gone. So tell me, how will this inland port help that to mitigate the impacts of our unclean air?
Well, one of the things that we're primarily focused on is going to 100% renewable energy inside the inland port, and that we're working on that with our partners with utility company partners and others to do just that. So as buildings get built, they're powered with renewable energy. As the operations inside those buildings begin to take effect, that's all coming from renewable energy sources. That will help with the overall air quality issues, not just in the valley but around the state. We are primarily focused on moving the infrastructure forward so that electric vehicles, electric trucks, and near zero emissions vehicles can be fueled and utilized inside the inland port and start to move.
There's a lot about that. I've read your report, and there's a ton of things about creating jobs of the future and green energy this is, I want to just read you a quote from Bryan.
Well, let me finish my point.
Okay.
If we can, as those trucks, as zero emissions vehicles and new trucks and new pieces of cargo equipment get deployed, you've got to have the infrastructure in place to support those. The infrastructure is not just the charging pedestals and the fueling islands and things like that we can work on developing around the state. It's also creating those job programs, those training programs, those workforce programs around those new technologies to support those new technologies and the development of those new technologies. And it's moving away from training folks to be diesel mechanics and moving toward becoming battery technicians and electric motor technicians and things like that. And those are the new jobs, and those are the higher paying jobs that we're talking about.
But aren't you going to have to convince the trucking companies to make the switch over away from diesel to electric vehicles to make that a reality?
That without the infrastructure, it won't be a reality. And so that's what we're saying. We're agnostic as to technologies or as to a particular OEM or another. What we're saying, our role, we think, is to build the infrastructure, including the service training programs and things like that, so that the trucking companies, as they make the investment in trucks, they can deploy those trucks here because they'll have the support for those trucks here.
Okay. I want to read you this quote from Bryan Moench, who's with Utah Physicians for a Healthy Environment. He says, the newly released plan, you spent $883,000 on the new plan, and it's beautiful. I just looked it over, and it's got a lot of beautiful graphics. It uses a lot of the buzzwords everyone wants to hear: renewable and sustainable and green energy. But he says it uses a lot of these buzzwords, clean technology, monitoring, but it otherwise gives us no actual information. He says it gives us no reason to reconsider what has been obvious since the beginning. The inland port will bring a lot more pollution and dirty energy into the Salt Lake Valley and is exactly the wrong direction for our economic future. So as far as it not, bringing in more dirty energy, how can you say it won't, at least initially, when the trucking industry and the logistics industry of the airplanes that come in are still using fossil fuel technology?
Well, the trucking industry and the shippers, the investment community that supports that invests in those companies, the consumers that buy the goods from those companies, they're the ones that are demanding this change, and the change is coming way more rapidly than any governmental program. Cory Booker not long ago said, "Change doesn't come from Washington, change goes to Washington." Same thing is true on Capitol Hill here. Change doesn't really come from Capitol Hill, change goes to Capitol Hill. And it's being driven by our consumers, ourselves, demanding that those changes in the way our goods are delivered to us. It's coming from the capital markets that are demanding that companies make these changes, because the capital markets understand the impact that we're having on our environment and from global warming through other things as well. And so this change is coming very, very rapidly. The companies are looking to deploy. because quite frankly, it's cheaper for them to run an electric truck than it is to run a diesel truck. They're more reliable, they last longer, they don't break down as much, and it's cheaper to run them on electricity than it is on diesel. So they're trying to make the move as quickly as they can. What they need is the infrastructure and the support facilities, the maintenance facilities, the technicians who are trained to work on those trucks. They need those kinds of things before they can deploy those trucks in a certain area. And so what we see as our role is to take those things and do those things and make those facilities available to them so they can deploy them here.
Okay. Well, I want to ask you a question about, you probably don't have the page in front of you, the plan in front of you, on page 26 of your plan. It's creating jobs of the future. It's the strategy, creating jobs of the future. And it says, work opportunities can help youths and adults develop marketable skills and become better prepared for the workforce. For business, these programs maintain and retain a skilled workforce. Basically, we want to have a skilled workforce to address the needs of logistics statewide. And there's a current U.S. trucking labor shortage of over 60,000 people, an increase of 20,000 in the prior year, because they're just continuing to lose drivers in the trucking industry. I mean, I assume that this page is pointing out the types of jobs it's going to create. And if we know that we already have a huge labor shortage of 60,000 in the trucking industry, we're going to need way more truckers to basically facilitate the plan that's in place here. Where are all these truckers going to come from to fill these jobs that are going to be open here?
Well, first of those trucking jobs are not all here in Utah. Those trucking jobs are nationwide, but there's a huge driver shortage nationwide. Drivers are aging out of the system, and it's not backfilling as quickly. So that puts upward pressure on wages, upward pressure on the salaries and things that can be paid to drivers, and so that helps lead to a better.
My question is, how is that a job of the future when we have this huge labor shortage and we're going to have to fill more of those jobs? And I think the reason why nobody wants to become a trucker right now is everybody feels in the next 10 years, robot self-driverless technology will just take over the position of a truck driver. It's going to be an antiquated skill.
Well, probably not that quickly. Someday it may very well, but it's not quite that. It's not going to take over that quickly. And I think I think part of the reason why, at least from the conversations I've had with truck drivers and people who are in the industry, part of the reason why they're having trouble backfilling those jobs is the fact that it's hard work. It's dirty. It's hard. It's noisy. There's a lot of vibration in the trucks, things like that. It's not a pleasant environment. That being said, the newer trucks, the newer technologies actually deal with a lot of those issues. They're quiet, they're clean, they're comfortable, they don't vibrate, they're not noisy. So it's not it's not the same environment that it was before. So there's a hope that will have something to do with replacing those truckers. But really the jobs that we're talking about aren't the truck driver jobs. The jobs we're talking about are the people who are going to have to work on those, whether they're driven by a driver or they're robotic. There's still got to be the people to work on those trucks, to repair those trucks, to build the trucks, the new trucks, to build the infrastructure and support the infrastructure. And it's a whole new level of infrastructure and support than we have today. And so there's a whole cadre of new jobs, probably far in excess of the number of truck drivers that are going to be needed in this new economy, this new logistics environment, to support these new technologies that are coming into the trucking world. And again, whether they're drivers or driverless.
You think there'll be a greater need for the people maintaining the technologies than the need for truck drivers? Because I just find this part of the plan kind of confusing.
It's exponentially greater. For every truck driver, there's between 5 and 10 support jobs that are there to support every truck driver. So it's mechanics, it's tire and wheel repair folks, it's chassis repair folks, it is the people who staff the service centers, it's people who dispatch, and people who schedule the loads and all that kind of stuff. So for every truck driver, it's somewhere between 5 and 10 jobs supporting that truck driver.
So when I had Greg Hughes on the program, he said that the Inland Port Authority was shifting far more to a hub and spoke model, which would benefit more rural areas and create more logistical centers in more rural places, and that the current wetlands area of the northwest quadrant of Salt Lake wasn't going to be such a logistical hub anymore. Is that still happening?
Yeah, and that's what I was trying to get to earlier. A large part of what we'll see, I think, come into the inland port area here in the Northwest Quadrant are going to be more of the high-tech manufacturing, people who are looking to utilize the logistics network and logistics facilities around that containerized ocean carrier model to locate in that area. And frankly, to bring cargo in here that's not necessary to come here isn't the most efficient way to do it. So we've already started our process of looking around the state, working with the Utah Association of Counties, looking around the state to identify what other facilities are around the state, because we've already mapped cargo flows through the state. So where we can match those cargo flows with existing facilities or the opportunity to create new facilities, we can start to disperse cargo away from here. If it doesn't need to come here, it doesn't have to come here. So send it somewhere else and create those economic opportunities in other places around the state. And that's something we're very excited about. We think it makes the system more efficient. We think it makes the network work better for all of us because a big majority of the cargo to Utah is actually moving through Utah. It's not coming here to be offloaded here and utilized here. It's moving from the Midwest to the West Coast and vice versa.
Yeah, well, that's the part of the plan that I think if it really does happen, if it's implemented to help places like Carbon County and Emery County, where the coal industry has been decimated, their economies are terrible, opioid epidemics just taking off in those places. Yeah. If you can somehow benefit those counties, then you'll get a lot more Utahns on board. I think you'll have a tough sell with Salt Lake County residents because we just absolutely number one priority. We want to keep our air clean and we want to have our ecosystems preserved and our quality of life preserved. So that's going to be a tough sell. But Jack, I really thank you for coming on the show. And if you have any parting comments about it, go right ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you and talk to your listeners. This is a huge opportunity for the state. It is a statewide initiative. It will have statewide benefits, and I think that's an important piece of the puzzle. So thanks for having me, and hope to talk to you again sometime.
Yeah, love to have you back. Hey, thanks, Great. Jack.
Thank you.
All right. And I want to tell you about another one of our sponsors. The Utah Stories Show is also brought to you by the Carpet Barn. The Carpet Barn is located in South Salt Lake. They've been in the carpet business for over 40 years. Their staff is friendly and helpful. They have a huge selection of carpet, and which, if you are looking to save a lot of money and get really awesome carpet, go visit the Carpet Barn. They've been in business for, like I said, over 30 years. I recently bought some carpet there and carpeted my basement. I paid $9 a yard for carpet that would have been $12 to $15 a yard at any big box store. So go visit the Carpet Barn, South Salt Lake, Google them, and tell them you learned about them from the Utah Stories Show. The lakes are open. Get out of the house and rent a jet ski from Action Toy Rental this summer. Rent 2 jet skis for as low as $277 a day. Take your friends and family out to the lake and enjoy a set of Yamaha jet skis that are so powerful they can pull someone on a tube, a wakeboard, or water skis. Book them online using offer code UT2020 to save an additional $40. You don't want to wait until the last minute to make your reservation because the weekends book up very quickly. So go to actiontoyrental.com now to see what days are available and book your 2 jet skis for any day you want to go out in the lake. Action Toy Rental offers lakeside delivery, or you can pick them up in Salt Lake City and bring them to any lake in Utah. Action Toy Rental is Utah's jet ski rental company. They have excellent 5-star reviews from Wave Runner, Boat and Jet Ski, and customers because they focus on being affordable, flexible, and easy to work with while still providing high-quality, top-of-the-line water sport machines. So go to actiontoyrental.com right now to book your next day. The lakes are open. Use the coupon code UT2020 to save $40 booking online over the phone so you get that extra discount. Utah Stories is the voice of local Utah. We want to listen to all voices. We want to hear everybody, and that's what this platform is all about. And with that said, I thank you very much for watching and listening. We just posted on Instagram the growth of this channel in the last month. It's been quite amazing to see. Mostly it's our short documentaries that have done incredibly well just over the past month. I don't know really why, but they've done incredibly well. The podcast is just kind of slow, incremental growth. But still, I never expected with a podcast that's diving deep into political matters that we would see a giant spike in an audience. I think you are watching because you are a person who wants to be more well-informed of the issues, doesn't want to take an ideological position, but wants to take a truth and fact-based position, and that's what we want to do here. So thank you very much for watching. The program is our booking. The program's produced and helped by Connie Lewis, Tyler Bond, and Golda Hukic-Markosian. Thank you very much to all of them. Please subscribe to us, our digital newsletter at utahstories.com. Follow us on Instagram. Follow us on Twitter now. We're using that platform a little more than we used to. And especially go subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit that little bell icon so you know every time we come out with a new video. And last thing I want to say is our June-July issue. It's about to be replaced by our July-August issue. You can still pick it up if you go visit the associated food stores across the Wasatch Front. That's Dick's Fresh Market, that's Reams and Macy's, not Reams, Macy's and Dan's. So if you go to all those stores along the Wasatch Front, from basically Draper to Ogden, you can pick it up there. We really thank them for allowing us to distribute the magazine there, as well as 600 other locations throughout Utah. All right, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.